So I want you to picture a September morning on the south bank of the Mara River. This is right on the border of Kenya and Tanzania. And if you know anything about this ecosystem, you know it is usually deafening.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, like at the first light of the sun, birds just explode into noise, and there's this constant ambient hum and, the splash of wildlife.
Yeah, it's never quiet.
Exactly. But on this specific morning, there is an eerie, absolute silence. It's the kind of quiet that feels, I don't know, fundamentally wrong to anyone who spends time in the bush.
Mm-hmm. The kind that makes you instantly nervous.
Yeah. The herons are completely missing from the shallows. Even the massive Nile crocodiles who typically park themselves in the mud to warm up have completely abandoned the banks and retreated to deep water.
Which is a huge red flag.
Right. And when the park rangers arrive at an isolated bend in the river to investigate, they find out why. Tucked between the soil and the thick vegetation of the bank, there is something terrifying. It's the carcass of an adult male hippo.
A massive one, too.
Yeah, we are talking about a 1,000-kilogram animal, bearing the scars of decades of life in the wild. But it's not the sheer size of the body that stops the rangers in their tracks. It is the physical condition of the carcass.
This is the part that is just unbelievable.
Its incredibly thick, armored neck has been severed with such brutal mechanical force that the massive head is hanging by literally a single thread of muscle.
And the detail that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up is what wasn't there.
Right.
Absolutely nothing had been eaten. Not a single bite of meat taken by scavengers or predators. Everything was just left there to rot.
Which makes no sense in that ecosystem.
None at all. And even more chilling, according to the incident logs, this was the third massive body found in exactly this condition in just 60 days.
Unbelievable. Well, welcome to our deep dive. Today we are taking a fascinating stack of sources, including field incident reports from park rangers, biological research papers on African herbivore anatomy, and some truly shocking camera trap data.
Straight from the front lines of wildlife monitoring.
Exactly. We are investigating a bizarre, almost impossible biological mystery playing out right in the middle of the animal kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission today is to uncover what or who is committing these extreme acts of violence.
And what this terrifying case teaches us about the absolute limits of animal and perhaps human behavior under pressure.
So to even begin to comprehend the bizarre nature of this crime scene, I feel like we first have to understand the pressure cooker that birthed it.
Oh, for sure. The physical evidence left these highly experienced rangers completely baffled, and to see why, you really have to look at the ecology of the Mara River itself during this specific time of year.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the Mara River is not some, peaceful, babbling brook you might picture in a pastoral landscape.
No, not at all.
It is an absolute arena of brute force. This is the site of the Great Migration. Every single year, 1.5 million wildebeest and zebras cross this water, turning it into an explosion of chaos and panic.
It's an aquatic highway.
Yeah, filled with 4-meter-long Nile crocodiles, just waiting like torpedoes for a misstep.
It's an ecosystem where the only law is force, and everyone is constantly on edge.
And that ambient tension is crucial context, because it gets exponentially magnified by the weather.
Right, the dry season.
Exactly. The field reports highlight that this was during a particularly brutal dry season. When the drought hits, the river physically transforms. What was once a wide, flowing, continuous corridor, it fragments into isolated, hot, fetid pools of mud.
Just a terrible environment.
I want you to imagine the smell of stagnant water and hundreds of massive bodies. You have predators and prey that would normally maintain very strict, safe distances from one another, unnaturally compressed into tiny, shrinking spaces.
So everyone is just packed in together.
Right. The tension isn't just a concept in a biology textbook, it is a physical reality. The guides there know that when the river shrinks too much, the stress hormones in every animal spike, and, something always explodes. Which brings us back to our victim. The hippo is the third largest land mammal on the planet, trailing only elephants and rhinos.
They are absolute tanks.
Yeah, an adult male weighs between 1 and 3 tons. They have skin that is 5 centimeters thick, packed with dense collagen. And here is a wild fact from the research. Statistically, hippos kill more humans than lions or elephants combined.
Which is crazy when you think about it.
Right. And they do this despite being strict herbivores. They don't hunt for food. They kill purely over territorial disputes. Any unauthorized presence in their stretch of the river is treated as a lethal declaration of war.
Yet despite that aggressive reputation, the state of this carcass was a complete anomaly.
How so?
Well, hippos absolutely fight over territory, but biological studies show those fights are slow, exhausting wars of attrition.
Like pushing matches.
Exactly. Two males will face off, open their jaws to display their tusks, and then essentially engage in a brutal pushing match. They press, they try to bite each other's flanks, and it usually results in, like, scattered puncture wounds.
Oh.
Eventually, the loser recognizes he is outmatched and retreats. They very rarely die on the spot, let alone get decapitated. This carcass didn't look like the result of a biological struggle.
It looked totally different.
Yeah, the sheer shearing force required to cut through a neck that thick made it look like it had been dismantled by heavy industrial machinery.
See, I am looking at this like a locked room murder mystery.
Yeah.
You have a habitat that is famous for its violence, sure. But to sever a spine wrapped in that much muscle?
It's hard to fathom.
Right. Surely, in an environment this extreme, where everyone is starving and compressed into these mud pools, some apex predator just got lucky. Or maybe a group of predators got incredibly desperate.
Well, let's run through the lineup of suspects the investigators considered because they started with the exact same assumption.
Okay. Who was suspect number one?
Suspect number one on the ranger reports. Lions. A large coordinated pride, especially one desperate during a severe drought, can and will take down an adult hippo if they have no other options.
But I'm guessing the forensics at the scene didn't support a lion attack.
Not at all. A lion kill is messy and chaotic. You'd expect to see hundreds of scratch marks from claws, torn flesh on the hindquarters, and signs of a prolonged, exhausting struggle in the mud.
And there was none of that.
Zero. Furthermore, if we look at the biomechanics, a lion's jaw, no matter how powerful, physically cannot decapitate a massive adult hippo.
Their mouths just don't work like that.
Right. Their bite force and the conical structure of their canine teeth are designed for puncturing the windpipe to suffocate, not for generating clean, blunt force destruction through solid bone.
Okay, so if we are ruling out lions based on jaw mechanics, I have to heavily argue for suspect number two, the Nile crocodile.
Ah, the crocodile.
Yeah, we just established they're 4, sometimes 5 meters long. They weigh up to 900 kilos. They have one of the strongest bite forces on the planet, second only to the saltwater croc.
True.
If anything in that river is taking off ahead, it has to be an aquatic torpedo with a prehistoric jaw, right?
The crocodile is definitely the most intuitive suspect for an aquatic kill. And crocodiles use a hunting technique called the death roll, which is utterly devastating.
Right, they just spin.
Exactly. They grab a limb or the neck, pull the victim underwater, and violently spin their entire body weight. They've been documented taking down adult wildebeest and even small hippos this way.
So why not this hippo?
Because we have to look closely at crocodile dental anatomy. Their teeth are peg-like. They are designed to grip and hold, not to slice.
Oh, I see.
The death roll kills by drowning and rotational dismemberment. It leaves incredibly deep, jagged lacerations and torn, ripped flesh. It does not leave a clean, blunt force decapitation through cervical vertebrae that are essentially the size of cement blocks.
That makes a lot of sense. Plus, there's that terrifying detail you mentioned earlier. None of the meat was consumed.
Exactly.
A crocodile doesn't expend the massive caloric energy required to death roll a 1-ton hippo just to leave all that fresh meat rotting on the bank. They were opportunistic eaters. They wouldn't waste a meal like that, especially in a drought.
Precisely. The biological signatures of apex predators simply weren't there.
Okay, well, if biology is failing us, if a crocodile's death roll is too messy and a lion's jaw is too weak, my mind immediately goes outside the animal kingdom.
You're thinking humans.
Yeah, we have to be looking at human interference. Chainsaws. Heavy machinery. Maybe an accident with a massive boat propeller, since we know hippos sometimes attack boats and get hit by the blades.
And the field investigators heavily explored the human element. I mean, poachers are a tragic reality in these reserves.
Exactly.
But the theory completely falls apart under the logistical evidence. First, nobody in the reserve outpost reported hearing any outboard motors or chainsaw sounds during the days these carcasses appeared.
So it was completely silent.
Yes. Second, these kills happened in completely isolated, rugged bends of the river. We are talking about muddy, steep terrain, inaccessible to heavy gear. You couldn't get a vehicle or a heavy boat in there without leaving obvious massive tracks in the soft clay.
Wait, if we are talking about poachers, their entire motive is profit. They want the ivory. Did the rangers find the canines on the victim?
That is the killing blow to the human theory. The investigators found the ivory canines perfectly intact on all 3 bodies.
No way. They left the ivory.
Yeah. An adult hippo possesses ivory teeth that are worth a fortune on the illegal market. No poacher on Earth is going to risk navigating a crocodile-infested river, somehow saw through a hippo's neck without making a sound, and then just leave the ivory behind. It wasn't human.
Okay, so it's not the claws of a lion, it's not the death roll of a crocodile, and it's not the chainsaws of poachers. What about suspect number 4? Elephants.
Elephants?
Yeah, I was reading one of our sources about elephants going into must, that state of severe hormonal change where a giant male elephant experiences a massive surge in testosterone and just goes into an absolute blind rage.
Just attacking everything in sight.
Right. Could an elephant do this?
It's a phenomenal theory because a bull elephant in must absolutely possesses the mass and the tusks to obliterate a hippo. They've been known to flip rhinos.
Wow.
But again, the crime scene betrays the theory. Not a single elephant footprint was found anywhere in the perimeter of the kills. An angry, multi-ton elephant does not levitate away from a crime scene.
Okay, I am genuinely stumped. If we have eliminated every external predator and we've ruled out humans and raging elephants,
Oh, yeah.
what in this ecosystem could possibly generate the sheer mechanical force to snap a concrete-like spine?
Well, the answer violates everything we thought we knew about herbivore biology. Because all external suspects were eliminated, the investigation had to turn inward.
Meaning another hippo.
Exactly. The killer was a rogue member of their own kind, wielding a deeply misunderstood biological weapon.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Tell me about the camera trap data. How did they actually find this rogue hippo?
By meticulously combing through weeks of motion sensor camera trap footage and cross-referencing it with the testimonies of the reserve guides, researchers identified a single glaring anomaly.
What was it?
A colossal, abnormally large alpha male hippo. And this specific individual had been exhibiting hyper-extreme behavior over the preceding months, completely crossing the line of what behavioral ecology considers normal territorial defense.
But wait, to understand how he physically committed these murders, we have to correct a massive public misconception about the hippo's primary weapon, right?
We do.
Because when most people picture a hippo yawning at a zoo, they usually imagine these big, round, blunt herbivore teeth. We think of them like giant molars designed for chewing river grass.
And that image is fundamentally wrong. If you look at the anatomical research, the lower canines of an adult hippo are not just teeth, they are actual swords.
Swords?
Yeah, they're made of ultra-dense ivory, which is one of the toughest biological materials in nature, and in a dominant male, they can grow up to 50 centimeters long.
That's half a meter of solid ivory projecting from the lower jaw.
Exactly.
And there's a specific anatomical feature to these tusks that makes them so lethal, isn't there? Something about how they interact with the upper jaw.
Yes, and it is a marvel of evolutionary engineering. They are self-sharpening.
Wait, really? Self-sharpening?
Yeah. Every single time a hippo closes its mouth, the angle of the jaw causes the lower canine teeth to shear directly against the upper canine teeth.
So they just grind against each other.
Right. This constant friction doesn't wear the teeth down into dull nubs. It acts as a built-in biological whetstone. At a molecular level, the ivory shaves against itself, creating a continuous razor-sharp edge.
Okay, so you have half-meter permanently sharpened ivory swords. But just possessing the weapon doesn't explain the decapitation. I mean, I could hold a perfectly sharpened sword, but I couldn't chop through a tree trunk without immense force.
And the mechanics of the skull and the jaw muscle explain that force. A hippo's skull has a hinge set incredibly far back, allowing the jaw to open to a terrifying angle of 150 degrees.
That's almost flat.
Yeah. And when that massive structure snaps shut, the muscular force generates over 1,800 psi pounds per square inch.
Wow.
To put that in perspective, we mentioned a lion's bite earlier. That is around 500 to 700 psi.
So it's more than double a lion.
Now take that 1,800 psi, add the 50-centimeter self-sharpened swords, and put 2 tons of body weight swinging behind it.
I want you, the listener, to picture a standard pair of scissors. You understand how shearing force works? Now imagine those scissors are half a meter long, made of solid ivory, and powered by the weight of a pickup truck.
That is terrifying.
You aren't describing an animal bite anymore. You are essentially describing an industrial hydraulic press.
That is the perfect analogy, and that is exactly where the forensic evidence finally makes sense. This wasn't a bite of distributed crushing force meant to hold prey.
Right.
This was a high-speed, lateral, upward strike. The alpha targeted the exact junction where the heavy skull meets the neck.
The weak spot.
Exactly. That specific spot is a vulnerability. The cervical vertebrae there aren't protected by the massive bulk of the shoulder muscle, but are instead surrounded by major blood vessels and a vital joint. It's a devastating double puncture from those swords, followed immediately by tons of collapsing weight.
So the sheer physics of it means the first strike severs the ligaments and causes instant shock. The second and third thrash of the head finished the job. The victim was dead before their brain even registered what was happening.
Precisely. The mechanical mystery is solved. But this brings up an even darker behavioral question.
Right, the motive.
Yeah, in biology, animals kill for two primary reasons: caloric intake or immediate defense. Since this alpha hippo wasn't eating them and the victims were totally destroyed in seconds, why was he expending massive energy to do this repeatedly?
That is the core of it. We have the weapon, but what was the motive? I was looking at the timeline in the ranger reports. We were talking about 3 massive kills in a 60-day window.
It's a very tight time frame.
Yeah. The first carcass appeared, then 50 days later they found the second, and then just 38 days later the third. In nature, there are usually biological rules of engagement. When a dominant male secures his territory and a rival backs down, the violence stops.
That is the standard biological script. The rival retreats, the victor is satisfied, and his stress levels drop because, frankly, fighting is incredibly energy intensive.
But this alpha did the exact opposite.
He did. And this raises an important question about how extreme environmental stress can fundamentally break an animal's instinctual neurological programming.
I want to push back on this slightly. Surely even a highly stressed animal wants to conserve energy. Killing a 1-ton rival takes massive effort and carries a huge risk of injury.
It does.
So why not just chase them away? What broke in his brain that made him choose murder over a simple eviction?
It comes back to the shrinking river. The brutal drought didn't just make him irritable, it permanently recalibrated his spatial tolerance.
What do you mean by that?
Usually when a rival backs down and creates physical distance, it triggers a hormonal surrender response in the winner's brain. The dopamine and serotonin stabilize, signaling, okay, the threat is neutralized.
The fight is over.
Right. But because the river had shrunk into these tiny fetid pools, there was no space for the rivals to actually retreat to. The constant, unnatural proximity of other males kept his cortisol, the stress hormone, at a permanent toxic peak.
Wow.
This alpha essentially lost the neurological ability to register surrender.
So the trigger for his aggression wasn't resistance anymore, it was simply their presence. If you existed in his water, your very existence was an active threat and you died.
That is exactly what the camera traps revealed. It became a true serial pattern, a pathological compulsion to eliminate.
You just snapped.
Yeah. He created an absolute dead zone in his stretch of the Mara River. It was a reign of terror. Female hippos and vulnerable calves huddled in incredibly tight, stressed groups on the opposite, shallow banks, terrified to enter deep water.
Even the crocs left right.
Yes. Even the massive Nile crocodiles, who usually share the water with hippos in a kind of pragmatic, silent truce, were observed actively abandoning the water and trekking overland to avoid his territory.
That's insane.
He didn't need to build fences, his sovereignty was absolute, and every single animal in that ecosystem felt it.
It's terrifying. It's like the environment fundamentally rewired him into a completely different creature, a monster.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to realize something crucial about biology. The hippo wasn't, evil.
Right, animals aren't evil.
Nature doesn't really have a moral judgment for evil. He was responding to real, intense environmental pressures with the exact tools that evolution gave him over millions of years. The shrinking environment created the monster. It pushed normal, healthy territoriality, which is necessary for survival, into a toxic compulsion to destroy.
So what does this all mean? How does a story like this end? Well, the truth from our sources is that it pauses. It doesn't actually end. The seasonal rains eventually returned to the Mara. The river swelled, the isolated mud pools connected back into a flowing, healthy highway, and the rogue alpha's cortisol levels finally dropped.
The pressure was released.
Yeah, his rage subsided, and the camera traps showed him going back to exhibiting normal hippo behavior. But the chilling reality of this ecosystem is that the cycle of drought will inevitably return.
It always does.
The waters will recede again, and that same alpha is still down there. He's submerged, invisible, just waiting for the environmental spark of the dry season to ignite that instinct again.
I think there is a deeply actionable takeaway here, connecting this extreme wildlife phenomenon directly to our own lives.
Absolutely.
We aren't that far removed from our own biology. When resources shrink and pressure mounts around us, whether that is a literal drought, a shrinking budget at work, a looming deadline, or a period of high, relentless stress in our personal lives, our normal, healthy instincts to protect our territory can easily warp into toxic, destructive behavior if we aren't careful.
It's all about self-awareness. We need to be highly aware of our environment's effect on our psychology. We have to recognize when our own personal river is drying up before we lose our ability to register when someone else is surrendering and we start lashing out at everyone around us.
Precisely. The context dictates the behavior. If we don't manage the pressure cooker manages us.
That is such a powerful way to look at it.
Yeah.
And it leaves us with this final provocative thought to ponder today. If a simple change in water levels can turn a strict grass-eating herbivore into a decapitating terror of the river, what dormant extreme versions of ourselves are just one severe environmental shift away from waking up? Think about that the next time you feel the walls closing in. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.